7 years ago, the game preservation landscape was pretty bleak. Companies saw digital as the best future for them, cutting out the middleman to maximize their profits while also eliminating that pesky used game market that patient gamers love to exploit. The all-digital future is what game companies want, but gamers are rightfully worried that they won't be able to play their games that they bought years after the system is no longer relevant. Certain cases like Scott Pilgrim vs. the World and the PT demo were genuine causes for concern. Limited Run Games was formed as a way to bring the founder's game to a physical medium and became a resistance to digital erosion by offering physical games with all the DLC and patches included on the disc, ensuring that anybody who owned a copy of their game owned them forever without an internet connection. Forever physical, if you will. As a result, Limited Run Games has gone from a scrappy startup to a full-fledged publisher who have brought countless indie games to physical media and also partner with AAA studios like Ubisoft, Konami, and Lucasfilm, but along the way, they've become a shell of their former self. I've been purchasing Limited Run games since their first year. I've spent close to $4,000 on games and collector's editions like Sigil, Night Trap, Chex Quest, the Tetris Final, and even a Doom helmet. I even have the Snatcher soundtrack on cassette along with this Toe Jam and Earl Genesis case. And I've had good experience with Limited Run. I've goofed on ordering something and they were able to change it before the item arrived. I've gotten a collector's edition that came damaged one time and they swapped it out without a hassle. And I've been able to get every game that I've wanted without any hiccups. But in the last couple of years, my experience has soured and it's getting harder and harder to ignore these issues because of how established the company has become. This isn't a small startup with 2 people running it out of the garage and they don't know what they're doing. I mean, you can tell that they wish they still were a small company because they do get frustrated every time some dork with a YouTube channel complains about them. Some of my issues are subjective, like the quality of the games being offered. Bill and Ted's excellent adventure collection ported to the Switch? Really? Then you have the overall quality of the product itself. Limited Run has really leaned into the collector side of things by offering skate decks featuring Shantae or Bill and Ted, which, hey, if you're into that kind of thing, cool, but the collector's editions themselves have been lacking in quality. My Star Wars Shadows of the Empire collection has a crease where you open the door and it's causing the glossy black coating to crack and show white underneath. The posters are folded and have noticeable wear on the creases as well. My Chex Quest Zorcher looks like it was hastily put together with uneven gaps and paint runs, and it makes it look like it was an at-home craft project that you would buy on Etsy, not something that was in a $150 collector's edition. But hey, I've learned my lesson. The collector's editions aren't worth the money, and if I don't like a game that they're selling, I don't have to buy it. I've never really felt compelled to buy everything that they put out anyway, and I suggest that if you're struggling to break the FOMO, you should do what I did and put all the game prices in an Excel sheet and then add it all up. It's a pretty sobering experience. The biggest thing though that really soured me, and the whole reason why this video is being made, is that in the past 2 years I've bought 3 games that have broke Limited Run's forever physical ethos. They are published by Limited Run, they're not distributed, and to make matters worse, these issues didn't present themselves until after I purchased the games. And Limited Run made no effort to notify me directly and offer to make me whole. First up is Streets of Rage 4. I bought this in May of 2020. This was one of the first times Limited Run was able to announce a physical release the same time that the game was announced. And if you're familiar with how Limited Run has operated in the past, you know that once a game gets announced digitally, they're inundated with tweet tags begging them for a physical release. So this was a huge get for them until July of 2021, and the developers announced free DLC for the game. This really isn't that big of a surprise for most modern physical copies. I mean, we've grown to expect that when you buy a game day one, there's a possibility that down the line DLC and patches can be released. But with Limited Run, they've branded themselves on the notion that all of their games are complete, meaning the final game version is on the cart with all the DLC, so if the server shut down tomorrow, you're still going to be able to play the game and everything that was released along with it. Not the case with Streets of Rage 4, and as an added kick to the teeth, this game was released globally around the same time as the Limited Run release for less money, and then a year later, the developers released another physical copy with all the DLC included on the cart. Now, I can't really fault Limited Run too much on this one. This was their first day one release that I can find, and how could they have foreseen that the dev would do them dirty and release it globally? Surely they won't let it happen again, right? Right? Next up is the Doom Classic Collection, and this contains the Doom Classics, Doom, Doom 2, and Doom 3, all in one cartridge. It says so right on the description. But there's a catch. You need, or at least you did at the time, a Bethesda account connected to your gamertag to access the game, something that's not mentioned on Limited Run's site, but was clear to people who bought it digitally in 2019. This form of DRM is rampant among the industry, and eventually Bethesda did agree that it was stupid to lock 30-year-old games behind an account and eventually dropped the requirement. I will point out that if your console has at any point connected to that company's online service, the game cart will work just fine. However, if down the line you play this game on a console that has never been connected to the service, either because you live off the grid or your hard drive died or they shut it down completely, you can't play this version of the game. Limited Run eventually put out a notice on their blog and on Twitter letting people know that if they wanted to, they could return the cart that they had in exchange for one that works. And I do find it funny that the way that this blog post was written, that they were unaware of this issue until after the shipment and fans brought it to their attention. When it says right on the box that a persistent internet connection is required for the game. Who's putting this disclaimer on the box then? Who gave final approval for the box art? Did they test the games before mass producing them? At least one person at Limited Run is an avid gamer and developer, so someone should have noticed this and said something, because this was caught almost immediately after the game landed in people's hands. Almost 6 months before Limited Run said something officially, and 1 month before my order even shipped. They could have just held any unfulfilled orders and sent out replacement carts directly instead of waiting until the rage died down to make a throwaway announcement on their blog. Limited Run may have had their hands tied with DRM, but they are fully responsible for deliberately mitigating costs and by announcing the fix the way that they did. And it's especially egregious if they knew about this requirement before production even started and failed to mention it at point of sale. If you wanted a replacement, you really had to have been actively following Limited Run to know that this was even an offer. There were no attempts to email everyone who bought the game to let them know that there was a potential fatal error on the cartridge or the disc that they spent money on and would render the game potentially unplayable. And don't tell me that they couldn't have the capability to do so, because I get notifications letting me know to make sure that my address is up to date before a specific game I ordered is ready to ship. And honestly, it is something that shouldn't have even been an issue prior to production anyway. I've seen posts about quality checks before things go into production. Why was this missed? And what steps are being taken to prevent it in the future? There's no assurance from Limited Run that any checks are being put in place after this mistake. And finally, the biggest oof of them all is Scott Pilgrim vs. the World Complete Edition. It isn't complete. It contains DLC from the game on the disc, which is great, but you need to link your Ubisoft account, which requires an online connection. The most desired game the game that people pointed to as why physical media is so important was published by a company founded on the principle that games should be played forever, requires an internet connection to unlock media already on the disc. This comes at a time when Ubisoft has announced that certain games are eventually not going to allow you to download DLC starting in September. And Limited Run isn't doing anything to rectify this at all. The manual or the box doesn't even mention that you need to connect a Ubisoft account. It just says that you need either a PlayStation Network or a Nintendo account for online play. And this isn't anywhere on the site either. In fact, the site says that you can play all of the characters, so as a consumer who's bought games since year one, I have a reasonable expectation that there shouldn't be anything extra for me to do to access the content that I paid for. This is specifically why I bought the physical copy in the first place. And speaking of the site, it's atrocious now. Go back to your orders before they redesigned it and click on a product. Notice anything different? The product descriptions are all missing, most likely due to the change of the formatting of the site, but it doesn't look like that they're in a hurry to add that stuff back in. I went all the way back to one of their first releases and it shows that those descriptions aren't there. I had to use the Wayback Machine to verify all of this information to be sure that I wasn't talking out of my butt for this video, and it's a pretty tedious task with no real timeline or a fix or even an acknowledgement that this is a case. The game is also version 1.0, and there is an update that can be downloaded to fix bugs. And even after the fact, Limited Run doesn't disclose this. I had to go digging to see if they would even acknowledge it, and I found one of the most apathetic responses from one of the founders. That's the only version that they could use. And he liked a tweet from somebody saying that they would rather see a partial release rather than none at all. What? I mean, why even use the physical moniker anymore? What's the point of being Limited Run if you're not going to stick to your original ethos? That's the whole reason why Limited Run is successful. You preserve the games that could potentially be lost because of modern corporate greed. I want to emphasize again that the whole reason why I'm making this video is because none of these issues were disclosed prior to me purchasing the game. And the way that the statements are written, it implies that these issues weren't present until after manufacturing was finalized and too far along to modify. Even if that's the case, the issues were never directly disclosed to me via an official channel to offer compensation in the form of a partial or full refund. I don't pretend to know about Limited Run's production process, but it would seem to me that before you even ink a deal and announce the product, you have all of the details about the version of the game that you're about to sell. If you don't have all the details, you shouldn't be offering the product for sale. It's just that simple. It's a huge red flag to me that a company as big and experienced as Limited Run appears to give bigger studios a good faith agreement that they won't screw over their customers, when the whole reason why people want physical games to begin with is to avoid getting screwed over by buying a digital license and having it be revoked at any time with no refunds. By failing to disclose this information to the consumer prior to the sale, Limited Run is just as culpable as the developer who refuses to grant them the final DRM-free version of the game. If they can't leverage their reputation with these companies, they shouldn't be doing business with them, because their reputation is forever tarnished by continuing to let this happen. You even have a relationship with the Video Game History Foundation that goes through great lengths to preserve even the most minute things like office memos. It's already apparent that they care about the trinkets more than the actual games themselves. I'm sure that you're aware of the new Turtles beat-em-up Shredder's Revenge. It's getting a physical copy that's going to see a wider release, and Limited Run is taking the lead on this. And within a week of release, there's already been a patch addressing some game-breaking glitches, but there's no assurance from Limited Run that it will be on the final production version of the game. What happens if there's DLC down the line like with Streets of Rage 4? There's no mention of that. But if you like Pizza Hut, then I'm happy to report that after 300 cold emails over the span of a year, Limited Run has secured an official coupon for a free personal pan pizza, just like the one that was found in the box of TMNT 2 for the NES. You remember that? How cool is it that we get a coupon and it's official? You know how hard the founders worked to make that happen? Much more than they did to get basic DLC to be unlockable on the disc, I'll tell you that much. There are other future games that will probably require a download, like Doom Eternal for the Nintendo Switch. Doom 16 already required it, so until we hear otherwise, it's safe to assume that this will require a download because one of the founders was tempering expectations early. I would wonder if it still has that ugly blue download required logo on top of it as well. This is the direction that Limited Run wants to go. When you go all the way back to their original release, it was their own game and it was their dream to have a physical copy of it. They have a retro-inspired physical store where you can buy exclusive stuff. It's now all about the aesthetic of the collection rather than the actual content of the game. And the funny thing is about all of this is that they could take all of this criticism and become the heroes that they once were if it didn't cost them any money. So I'll give you a freebie softball to, at the very least, stave off some inevitable criticism that you're going to get. Release population reports for all of your games. Not just reinstating your data on the limited releases that had fixed quantity or whatever, the open pre-order stuff too. I reached out to Josh through DM on Twitter and I asked Doug publicly and I got no response, so I'll put it here. WATA is going to be grading current gen games very soon. PS4, Xbox, Vita, and Switch. And they've also made it known that it's entirely possible to get a perfect 10 grade. So how long will it be before somebody grades a limited run Switch game and sells it for an absurd amount? Limited run games already gets undeserved flack for the prices of their ungraded games that are no longer in print, and a lot of them were open pre-orders. Some even suggest that they did this on purpose, admitting that anybody who could have bought on open pre-order could have bought a case of these games. They will get flack for this graded stuff, and I guarantee you that they will try to act like they couldn't have seen this coming. And I'm making it known now, and I'm warning you, it will happen, and you can at least attempt to prevent it. At the end of the day, the real failure of Limited Run is their inability to leverage their 7-year reputation and over 1,000 published titles to do the bare minimum to maintain their integrity. I really couldn't care less about all of the goofy knickknacks that they have for sale. I've bought a ton of useless plastic for my collection solely because it looks good on my shelf, but I can't excuse when they can't deliver a complete game on a disc when that's what they built their entire reputation on. The company does not and will not take responsibility for their shortcomings or implement checks to prevent it in the future because doing so will cost them money. You can tell by the way that they communicate that they are aware that a lot of people wouldn't buy from them if they knew they could buy it from somewhere else. They rely a lot on the customer to bear the weight of the risk that another company probably would have taken on themselves. All pre-orders are paid for in full. There's no refunds after they're placed. If your item gets damaged in the mail because it came in a flimsy padded envelope, which have gotten cheaper over the years, it's your fault that you didn't upgrade to a cardboard box or bought the $1 shipping insurance. You can hope that you can get a replacement provided that they have enough extras though, but it's the consumer that assumes all the risk, and now we have another risk that the game might come incomplete because Limited Run either forgot to ask or was too skittish to demand that all of the content that they publish come DRM free on the disc. Limited Run has lost their way and they show no signs that they intend to go back to their roots, but hey, at least we got some free bottom tier pizza out of it.